Hello, I'm Chris of Alien Rabbit. Welcome to our channel. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. I thought I'd do a video today talking about why I enjoy the writing fiction that often crosses the genres of horror and science fiction. So it's going to be a few minutes long video, and I'll just talk about that. About why I do like exploring the dark side of human psychology, the imagination as well, in my writing work, and just talk about that in general. So I've always been interested in horror writing, even since the age of, well, primary school really. Most of the story creative writing I would have done when I was in school was mostly horror based, with a sprinkling of sci-fi. Now obviously this is because the media is exposed to, like Gremlins and Goosebumps. But I think everybody has is intrinsically drawn somehow to themes of fear and horror and terror. I guess some people enjoy escaping into it more, but that's, I see horror writing and science fiction horror writing as they only limits your imagination, I think, which is the great thing about it, really. And I've always been a person with an excess of imagination, and my head is in the clouds a lot, and then my feet are not always materially. My feet aren't very on the ground as a human being, as a person in general, right? So writing sci-fi horror is perfect because it gives me an opportunity to just completely go off the rails with my imagination, and try and conjure up images in prose which in a lot of respects some people wouldn't be able to access, that sort of like those visions, as it were, of either horror or could be ecstasy as well. I think one of the interesting things about horror writing in general and like science fiction writing is there is often a dichotomy between, there's a titillating aspect to horror, of course, which can go either way when it's actually portrayed on the screen or in a book, but that's always a hard thing to negotiate, actually. But anyway, I'm jumping around from 10 different subjects at once. Why am I interested in writing horror and science fiction? Part of me, I think, definitely enjoys testing boundaries. I wouldn't really describe myself as an edgelord as such, but I have links to that culture, maybe in some respects. Not in terms of really participating in it that much, though I do certainly a bit of dadaist, collage-y digital art when I can. But I pick and choose my subjects when it comes to that very carefully as well. I don't really spend a lot of this video justifying any weird art I may have made in the past, like, in terms of like collaging and quite grisly artworks, which I've done plenty of, because obviously I have a background as a visual artist as well as a writer. And yeah, I mean, a lot of my work could be said to be influenced in some respect by Francis Bacon, of course, who was, his own images divide people. Usually people either think they're tragic, beautiful things or just horrible in general. But yeah, I enjoy exploring that part of myself and of the collective mind, I think, as well, that is dark, and it has, there's a lot of ambiguity in horror as well. Even in a film like Aliens, for example, there's ambiguity there in terms of like a critique of neoliberalism and everything. But anyway, yeah, science fiction, and I think the melding of science fiction and horror is a good one because it mixes. We've got a lot of technological fears, I think, in the collective unconscious right now as the human race, the human species, as it were, and horror and science fiction melding is the perfect place to explore those fears. I mean, obviously another popular example of this, of course, is Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror, which is, brilliantly done. Sci-fi horror mashup in the traditional way, like something like the Twilight Zone, I guess. But it's just expertly crafted, and that's something that I'm interested in as a writer, is bringing back expertly crafted a sci-fi Gothic horror, really. And I do really love the Gothic tradition. That's something I've always adored even since the age of being a teenager, like growing up on vampire fiction novels. That was, that was my entry point into the culture of storytelling in a lot of ways. It was ghost stories, horror stories, vampire stories especially. I used to spend a lot of time researching the mythology of ancient cultures. It's something I've been fascinated in my entire life, and just how culture has expressed itself and how superstitions have expressed themselves over time. Whether there's rational explanations for all these things as well. I'm not going to now go into a spiel where I go on about why vampires are real. No, obviously not. But I find it fascinating because it's part, even from a psychological respect, what does a vampire represent? Like a predatory force, or say a werewolf? All these things have some validity in the world of actual reality as well, which is they're archetypes in a sense, right? Which is something I find very interesting. And I find if you're writing in a fictional story, you have to find ways to somehow, those tropes will be in there, but then how to subvert them, how to do something clever within the narrative of any story that you write, right? So, one example of a story that I wrote that I think is quite inventive in some respects is the cosmonaut story I wrote about a cosmonaut who gets transformed into a vampire because he wants to see space. I won't spoil too much of it, but basically it doesn't end that well for him really because of due to his fact of his immortality. And I've taken a trope about the immortal man, the cursed man, who's a vampire and all that sort of thing, put it into a different context, and then I won't spoil the ending of that one, but it's quite a grisly ending, which I quite enjoyed, to be honest. Sometimes I think I can maybe try and become too clever as a writer, where I'm just like having to write my way into a clever ending, which is, I don't think it's a good thing necessarily all the time. So I try not to do that, but it's sort of about. I'm a fantasist primarily as well. I'm only going to do this video will end soon, but I am a fantasist as a person. Like I said, I started off with this video. I've lost my imagination half the time. That does mean that I have to deal with the dark as well as the light stuff that comes into one's mind. I do have a bipolar diagnosis, so I have to deal with the extremes of mood and emotional turbulence, and the ability to imagine at sometimes an intensified degree, right? So writing horror stories and sci-fi horror stories gives me an outlet for those two extremes of my own nature, but picking up on everyone's vibes, as it were, if you will. Anyway, I think I'll end this video there. I've probably talked long enough. If do you write horror sci-fi crossovers? What's been your experience of writing that in that, broadly speaking, in that genre, as it were? I've had some of my tales described as grimdark, which is funny because I'm not even that familiar with that as a genre, but there's been a few times where I've been compared to a grimdark writer. Do you write grimdark yourself? How do you find the experience of writing that? It's generally like a very grim sci-fi horror-based feature, a bit similar to Warhammer 40k, which I was very into it, and still am a bit, but yeah. I'm going to end this video here. Like and subscribe if you like to hear about writing literature. This is Alien Rabbit's channel, so they also push books. I'm a publisher, an independent publisher, as well as a writer myself, wearing both hats, as it were. Anyway.